First story, by Sarah Thompson. I had always considered myself a rational and level-headed person. I never believed in the supernatural, or gave much thought to the dark and eerie stories people told. That was until one fateful night on Maple Street. It was a chilly autumn evening, and I was heading home after a long day at work. Maple Street, a narrow road lined with old oak trees, had always been a shortcut for me. But on this particular night, it seemed like a different place altogether. The streetlights were dim, and the shadows cast by the trees danced ominously on the cracked sidewalk. I quickened my pace, eager to reach the warmth and safety of my home. That's when I noticed him, a man standing beneath one of the flickering streetlights. He was tall, dressed in a long, tattered overcoat that seemed out of place in the modern world. His face was obscured by a wide-brimmed hat, and the dim light made it impossible to see his features clearly. As I drew nearer, my heart began to race. The stranger just stood there, motionless, staring in my direction. I couldn't make out his eyes, but I could feel them on me, penetrating my very soul. I had the eerie sensation that he was waiting for me, that he had been expecting me. I tried to dismiss my unease as paranoia, but every step I took, the stranger seemed to mirror. My footsteps echoed in the empty street, punctuated by the distant hum of a passing car. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Finally, I reached my front door, my trembling hands fumbling for my keys. The stranger had stopped beneath the same flickering streetlight, still watching me. I unlocked the door, slipped inside, and locked it behind me, my heart pounding in my chest. Peering through the window, I saw the stranger had not moved an inch. His presence outside my home sent shivers down my spine. What could he want? Why was he following me? Hours passed, and I couldn't tear my eyes away from the window. I watched as the stranger remained steadfast in his vigil. I had no choice but to call the police. When they arrived, they found no trace of the man. There was no evidence that he had ever been there, except for my shaken nerves and a lingering sense of dread. In the days that followed, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that the stranger was still out there, lurking in the shadows. I changed my locks, installed security cameras, and even considered moving. But no matter what I did, I couldn't escape the memory of that chilling encounter on Maple Street. To this day, I can't explain who the stranger was or what he wanted. I only know that he left me with a deep and lasting fear of the dark streets of my own town. Second story, by Mark Johnson. San Francisco was a city that never truly slept, and its streets were usually bustling with activity, even in the dead of night. But one foggy evening, as I was walking through the quiet streets of North Beach, I found myself in an encounter that would haunt my nightmares for years to come. The mist hung thick in the air, obscuring my vision and muffling the sounds of the city. I walked briskly, trying to get home as quickly as possible, my footsteps echoing eerily in the empty streets. As I turned the corner onto a dimly lit alley, I spotted them, a group of 5 people standing in a circle, their faces hidden beneath hooded jackets. My curiosity got the better of me, and I slowed down, trying to make out their features. They appeared to be engaged in some sort of ritual, their voices hushed and incomprehensible. I couldn't see what they were doing, but a chill ran down my spine. Just as I was about to turn and leave, one of them noticed me. The hooded figure pointed in my direction, and suddenly, all 5 of them turned to face me. I could feel their eyes on me, even though their faces remained hidden. My heart raced, and I took a step back, my instincts telling me to run. But before I could react, the group began to chant in a language I didn't recognize. The words seemed to hang in the air, vibrating with an unnatural energy. As the chant continued, I felt a strange sensation wash over me. It was as if the very air around me had grown heavy and oppressive. Panic surged through me, and I turned and fled, my footsteps echoing in the narrow alley. Behind me, the chanting grew louder, and I could hear their footsteps following me. I didn't dare look back. I ran faster than I ever had in my life, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't stop until I reached the safety of my apartment. I locked the door behind me and peered through the curtains, but there was no sign of the hooded figures. Had it all been a hallucination, a trick of the fog and my overactive imagination? I never found out who those people were or what they had been doing in that alley. But the memory of that midnight encounter still haunts me, and I can't help but wonder if I stumbled upon something dark and sinister on the foggy streets of San Francisco. Third Story, by Emily Parker. I had always been drawn to the quiet beauty of rural Alabama, and I often found solace in long drives through its winding, deserted roads. But one night, as I ventured into the heart of the countryside, I had an encounter that left me questioning my love for those lonely roads. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. I was driving along Route 47, the headlights of my car cutting through the darkness. It was a clear night, and the stars shimmered like diamonds in the black velvet sky. As I rounded a curve, I saw her, a young woman standing by the side of the road, her thumb extended in a classic hitchhiker's pose. She looked no older than 20, with long, dark hair and a tattered dress that billowed in the wind. She seemed out of place in the middle of nowhere. My heart went out to her, and I pulled over to offer her a ride. She climbed into the passenger seat, and I could see the relief in her eyes. She thanked me and told me her name was Sarah. She explained that her car had broken down a few miles back, and she had been walking for hours. We fell into an easy conversation as I continued to drive. Sarah told me about her life, her dreams, and her family. I couldn't help but feel a connection to her, as if we had known each other for years. But as I glanced over at her, I noticed something strange. Sarah's clothes seemed to be fading, as if they were becoming transparent. Panic rose in my chest, and I slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a screeching halt. Sarah turned to me with a sad smile, her features growing blurry. "Thank you for the ride," she whispered, her voice fading into nothingness. And with that, she disappeared right before my eyes. I sat there in shock, my heart racing, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Had I picked up a ghost on the desolate roads of Alabama? Or was it some kind of hallucination brought on by fatigue and the eerie atmosphere of the night? I searched the area, but there was no sign of Sarah. It was as if she had never existed. I continued my drive, but the loneliness of the road now felt suffocating. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had encountered something otherworldly that night, something that defied explanation. To this day, I can't drive through rural Alabama without thinking about the vanishing hitchhiker who appeared out of nowhere and then disappeared into thin air, leaving me with a chilling story that I can't forget. Fourth Story, by Michael Reynolds. New York City, a place that never truly sleeps, had always been my playground. The vibrant streets, the cacophony of sounds, the anonymity of the crowd. There was something about the city that was both exhilarating and comforting. But one night, As I walked alone through the bustling streets of Manhattan, I experienced a terror that I could never have anticipated. It was well past midnight, and the city was alive with its own unique energy. I had decided to take a leisurely walk, enjoying the cool breeze that swept through the towering skyscrapers. As I strolled down a dimly lit street, I couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. It was as if the usual vibrancy of the city had faded into an eerie stillness. I noticed him from the corner of my eye, a man in a dark suit and fedora, standing under a streetlight. He was looking in my direction, his face obscured by shadows. My steps quickened, and I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head. But every time I turned a corner or crossed a street, I felt his presence behind me. I dared not look back, fearing what I might see. Instead, I focused on reaching the well-lit areas of the city, where I thought I would be safe. But no matter where I went, the silent stranger followed, maintaining a constant distance. My heart pounded in my chest as I turned into a crowded avenue. I tried to blend in with the bustling throng of people, but I knew he was there, lurking in the shadows. It was as if he had no intention of revealing himself, only of tormenting me with his presence. I finally mustered the courage to turn and confront him, but when I did, the street was empty. There was no sign of the man in the dark suit and fedora. I was left standing in the middle of the bustling city, my heart still racing, my mind in turmoil. I couldn't explain what had just happened. Had I been imagining things? Was the stress of city life getting to me? Or had I truly been followed by a relentless and silent stranger, a figure who seemed to exist only in the shadows of New York City? I made my way back to my apartment, my footsteps echoing in the empty streets. I locked my door and peered through the curtains, but there was no sign of the man. I never saw him again, but the memory of that night still haunts me. It was a reminder that even in the city that never sleeps, there are forces at work that can fill the night with terror. Fifth Story, by James Mitchell. Detroit, a city once known for its industrial might, had fallen on hard times. Abandoned factories and warehouses dotted the landscape, serving as haunting reminders of better days. One weekend, fueled by curiosity and a thirst for adventure, I and a group of friends decided to explore one of these forsaken places, a decision that would lead to a nightmarish encounter. The factory in question was an enormous, decaying structure on the outskirts of the city. Its windows were shattered, and its walls were covered in graffiti. The air inside was thick with dust and the stench of decay. We entered cautiously, our flashlights cutting through the darkness. As we ventured deeper into the factory, we stumbled upon strange and disturbing sights. Old machinery lay in ruins, and eerie, unexplained noises echoed through the cavernous halls. But the true horror awaited us in the basement. A narrow staircase led us down into the bowels of the factory. The air grew colder, and the sound of dripping water filled our ears. It was there, in the dim light of our flashlights, that we discovered a room unlike any other. The walls were covered in strange symbols and crude drawings, and a foul odor hung in the air. But the most unsettling discovery was a collection of photographs scattered on the floor. They depicted people, men, women, and children, in various states of distress. Some were bound and gagged, others appeared to be in pain, and all of them wore expressions of sheer terror. We couldn't comprehend what we were seeing. Had we stumbled upon evidence of some unspeakable crime? Were these photographs a glimpse into the darkest corners of humanity? Panic set in, and we knew we had to leave and contact the authorities. But as we turned to make our way back up the stairs, we heard footsteps behind us, slow and deliberate. We shone our flashlights in the direction of the sound and froze in horror. There, in the darkness, stood a figure, a man, tall and gaunt, his face hidden beneath a tattered hood. Without a word, the hooded figure advanced towards us, his movements slow and deliberate. We ran, our footsteps echoing through the factory, but the figure pursued relentlessly. It was as if he knew the factory better than we did, navigating the treacherous terrain with ease. We finally burst out of the factory into the moonlit night, our breathless cries filling the air. We called the police, and they arrived at the scene within minutes. But when they entered the factory, they found no trace of the hooded figure or the photographs. To this day, we can't explain what we saw or who that figure was. All we know is that the abandoned factory in Detroit held secrets, far more terrifying than we could have ever imagined, and we were fortunate to escape with our lives. Thank you for joining us for the whole video. That video you see on screen is one of my favorite. Check it out. If you've enjoyed these horror stories, show your support by hitting the subscribe button. Did this tale send chills down your spine? Let me know in the comments.